Welcome to the Meaningful Work Podcast Fireside Chat, a more relaxed, deep conversation with this week's guest. So grab a coffee, a cigar, or whatever gives you the feels, and get ready to laugh and learn. Here's your host, Josh Schneider.
Welcome to the Fireside Chat. All right, Josh, I got so many things I want to follow up with you on. Maybe if we could just have you on the podcast for the next 9 hours, I can get 9 hours of free consulting. Yes.
Yep.
Welcome to the Josh Mitch Marathon. It's like
Hey,
a
whatever you want
PBS
to do,
special.
man. Yeah, we'll just keep it going, and we'll see how long people stay on. The longer you stay on, you may need to take a break halfway through and experience some peak trough recovery.
All right, so I have so many things, and you decide. But I'm interested in, like I said, how the importance of getting going versus the importance of finding and picking the right tool. I'm also super interested in sleep, and down to blanket choice, pillow choice. Obviously, we know light and blue light are bad for us while we sleep. Or really anything else that you're super pumped up about right now. You pick the direction, and if I don't like it, we're changing course.
Okay, then. Okay, so we can talk about tools for a second, digital tools, kind of productivity tools, things that you need on a daily basis. I just have a belief that it should be fun to work. I think I should have fun when I open up my computer or I open up my phone. I don't want my tool to hinder me having fun. And what does fun mean for me? I need to enjoy it. There needs to be no roadblocks. It should make sense for how my brain works. And I think because of that, your tool choice has to be highly individualized to your own criteria. So I don't have this written down anywhere on a criteria list, but maybe I should. But what I want in any tool is it should be fun to use, and that just means fun to me. So I get to define that. If it's not fun for me, then I say it's not fun. So I used the app Todoist for a long time. I loved Todoist. Well, they have been growing as a company. They've made a couple changes in the way that their software works, and it was no longer fun for me to use it anymore. I reached out to their team and I was like, guys, you just did this thing that just totally interrupts my workflow. Is there any way I can turn it off? And they said no. So I left. You know what? No hard feelings. It was a pain in the butt to leave.
Yeah.
I had all my data in there. It took me forever to get it all out, but it was no longer fun for me to use anymore. So I switched to OmniFocus. Now, some people, they look at OmniFocus and they run for the hills because it looks so complicated. It's very, it's expensive. It's $100 a year, compared to Todoist, which is only $30 a year. And some people don't even want to pay money for the productivity apps. And I've made OmniFocus fun for me to use. I've got my own set of terms in there. I can customize it the way that I want it. So it's this idea of what attracts you and what repels you. If my tool is repelling me when I go to open it, so if it's slow, if I go to click on something and it doesn't make sense to me, anything that goes under what repels me, I am not going to use it. In fact, I'm going to get it off my computer. I never want to see it ever again. And it's this process of honing in to what attracts you, and it's going to be totally different for every person. So if you like Microsoft Word, use Microsoft Word. Doesn't attract me.
That's actually really interesting, because this whole interview I'm staring at my Microsoft Word document and I'm like, this sucks. I'm like, this literally sucks. And now and as you know, I recently switched to Notion, and other than being able to do like a page inside a page inside a page, it's complicated as heck.
Yeah.
And that was simple for me, but one of the things I've learned about flow triggers is, we have different triggers. And for me, novelty and complexity are two of my, why I love cigars, why I love wine, why I love coffee.
Yeah.
And so I think Notion drew me in because of that. And now I'm looking at a Word document, which is so totally functional. It syncs so well with Dropbox. But now I'm why am I just not on a note that syncs between my phone and my, I could type quietly on the iPad instead of, and fun. Like, I love that as a first threshold.
Yeah.
Is it fun? Yes or no? And then that's so
And
good.
I say that as
Yeah.
a person, just as a side note, this idea of, and Josh, you and we've talked about this before in the group that we're in, is this idea of embracing your inner 8-year-old. Now, if you are running for the hills right now because this sounds crazy, please stay with us. Do not leave the podcast.
I still love mac and cheese.
But thinking back to who were you as a 7 or 8-year-old, you get to pick whatever age you want to go back to, but eight works for me. And before you were tainted by taxes and bills and expectations from others, what were the things that just lit you up? What were the things that inspired you and made you feel like yourself? What were the things that you would say, oh my gosh, that's me? And I love nostalgia. When you say that novelty, like I so relate to that. Not everybody's going to relate to that, but I bet there's something from your childhood or something from, your past 35 years that was a moment that you would classify as enjoyable, wonderful, fun, whatever that looks like for you. You could even use the word attractive. What was attractive? So for me, my word, it needs to have a certain element of fun and whimsy and just enjoyment to it. So I like things that are kind of just funny and whimsical and just kind of goofy. And what I use I channel that to then help me personally and professionally.
Okay, so that's so interesting because I bucked structure. I hate, like, when you rob me of my freedom, I feel like you put a gun to my head.
Yeah.
But this time at home has allowed me to apply structure in a way that I have, that my travel gave me the easy excuse to not. And so this is very, because I heard a speaker once say, like, I wander around like Mr. Magoo and wait for inspiration to strike. And that resonated my soul. And you're kind of saying something similar, yet you have found and taken to the idea and reality that structure is so critical, disciplines, rhythms. I like that idea of a rhythm versus maybe just a routine, but is so critical to setting up the day.
Yeah, so let me give you a quick story to kind of focus where we're going with this. This story comes from Bob Goff's book, Love Does, which has been probably one of my favorite books of all time, besides the Bible. You always have to say that. If faith means anything to you, you always have to say, besides the Bible.
In my favorite book, it talks about.
So Love Does, Bob Goff, one of his opening kind of prologue things is this idea of Tom Sawyer Island. So Tom Sawyer Island is this place at Disneyland and also at Disney World in Florida where you actually have to take a raft to get there. And so many people do not visit Tom Sawyer Island because it's inconvenient. You have to wait. So Tom Sawyer Island at Disney World, which I haven't been to Disneyland yet, I can't wait to go, but you actually have to go over near Splash Mountain and it's roped off. You have to go wait under this little pavilion for the raft to come. And then once the raft comes, you take it over this little lake, and then you're at Tom Sawyer Island. And it's a metaphor of what so many of us miss out on in the areas of our lives where we could actually experience this fun, attractive, meaningful part of our lives, and we never do it because there's a little bit of work involved. And taking that raft to Tom Sawyer Island is the same thing of that routine or that rhythm or that ritual that you need on a daily basis. So here's what I know. When I go stand in line to take the raft to Tom Sawyer Island, it's hot, it's muggy, it's inconvenient. I don't know how long it's going to take. But what I know is that on the other side of that raft, I'll be at Tom Sawyer Island. And only the people with the intention of going to Tom Sawyer Island actually make it across the lake. They actually make it across the raft. So this is a metaphor of what are the things, what are the places that you actually want to go, and what is disguised like work? What looks like hard work that actually if you did that hard work, you'd actually experience that other level of whimsy and excitement and energy and focus and productivity, whatever it is for you, for where you're trying to go and what you're trying to accomplish. I want to take that raft.
Wow. And that is in so many ways the core premise of meaningful work. We've seen in our studies that, and the listeners know this, but 4% of our work is this ultimate moment. 4% of your work, if you're lucky, is seeing that transformation for people. And that small, tiny percent of your work week that might not happen for days, weeks, months at a time. It's the idea of that. It's the thought of that. It's knowing that that's coming that so inspires you to cross on the raft, to be in the heat, to do the things that you honestly don't want to do, that are the true challenges of work. But if you know that you're getting to the other side, or you know that that moment is in what we try and do is say, how do we harness this and take it from 4% to 8% to 10% and truly transform the way that we work?
Yeah, and we get to be the designers of that.
Yes.
So you get to really figure out in an individualized way, what does that look like for you? So, very practically for me, like I said, I'm in my basement studio right now, which is my kind of creative zone. I've set this up. I've engineered this environment, and it's taken me months. We've only lived in this house for a couple years, but it's taken me a while to put things into place. So I'll rearrange my room to see, okay, maybe this will work a little bit better. I rearrange it. I find myself rearranging it about once a year. It's not on the calendar. It's not something that I feel guilt about if I don't do it. It's not that systematized. But every now and then I'm just like, you know what? This isn't working for me anymore. And if your workspace or your environment or what you're using, you just have that feeling of this isn't working for me anymore, that's when you know it's time to make a change.
Interesting. Okay, so I say the word so much, but I have had this
I didn't notice, so keep going.
epiphany over the last, couple weeks about I seem to sometimes question so much of what I'm doing or where I'm going along the way that I think I'm robbing myself of the ability to quickly slip into deep work or quickly get more progress. And I had this thought jump into my mind a couple Saturdays ago of, do I schedule quarterly days or every 6 months a day where I basically am like, it's called like question everything day. And I mean, I'm sure there's a book out there about this, but it's how much does questioning or rob, because I hear what you're saying with, if it comes in your mind and maybe I'm not focused today because my office setup is funky, or, I got 6 kids at home, like jumping all around and I just can't get focused. And I thought maybe if I tried this, what's that balance of like listening to that voice, but at the same time being like, no, I set this path forward and I'm truly going to move in on this. I guess in some ways, like, no, I am going to get to Tom Sawyer Island.
So, okay, let's talk about sleep for a second. Okay, ready?
Yes.
We're going to take a hard left turn. Here we
go. I love
go.
it.
Because I think sleep is so intertwined to what we're talking about here that we would be, I don't know how to use the word remiss, but I want to use that word.
I think that would have been a perfect
application. Here we go.
Granted,
So
I don't know what an adjective is, but let's continue.
That's fine. I was an English major, so there we go. Sleep, I think, is so important to what you're talking about here because you are going to be more available to your children, to your spouse, to your significant other, to whoever in your life, your work, your personal productivity and organization when you have the appropriate amount of sleep. And here I am not a father yet. She is on the way. My daughter is her due date is June 21st.
So close.
So we're counting down the days. And my wife and I, we don't know what's coming towards us with this newborn around the corner. So I know that I'm saying this kind of within the context of, about to have a newborn here. But we really value sleep. Both my wife and I really value sleep. And on the days that we are exhausted, we will give each other the gift of, hey, you need to go take a nap. Have you ever seen that video or that there's a meme of this 2-year-old and she's walking around on the beach and she's cranky and she just lays down in the sand and she takes a nap right there in the middle of the sand. And I think that's like, think about this from the perspective of an adult. If you are slogging through the mud in your work, just stop. Like, seriously.
Yeah.
We tell ourselves that we have to just push through, and I think there's a place, and it only comes by being well rested, where we can tell the difference between I'm slogging through this because it's tough work and it's deep work and it's something where gold is on the other side. And there's another part of it where you're literally just spinning your wheels and you're not making any traction whatsoever. So there's a difference between the two. In one example, you're making no progress whatsoever. And I think a lot of times you can't tell that because you're exhausted, you're tired, and you haven't been physically rejuvenated.
Your senses are so dulled. How can you tell the difference?
But when you're sharp from really good sleep, so this is why, we could talk for hours about sleep science and why it's so important to set up the critical conditions for healthy and best sleep. You can't tell the difference between those two types of work when you're sleep deprived and when your energy is depleted. When you have good energy, or when you've had the right amount of sleep, you can say, you know what, I think I'm spinning my wheels right now, and it would actually be better if we just went out to eat. Let's go out to eat.
Yeah.
I just want to go party. I'm going to go watch a TV show because I know that on the other side of that, or tomorrow morning, I'm going to make more progress in 30 minutes than I would in 3 hours sleep deprived.
Which opens up a beautiful possibility about this, working from home and remote work. And even you referenced Dan Pink and When, and in that book, he talks, I think a whole chapter is about naps in the middle of the day and how strategically, for Dan, he drinks a cup of coffee, takes a 20 to 25 minute nap. And by the time he wakes up, that coffee is in his system, and now he's turbocharged for the rest of the day. But you go into a traditional work environment and you mention taking a nap, and they're like, no, we got to get work done. How can we work if we're napping? And it's like, it's so basic, but Abraham Lincoln, if I've got 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'm spending the first 4 sharpening the axe, which when you're in the midst of the mud, or when you're in the airplane going 30,000 feet in the air, these suggestions and these thoughts, they seem almost trivial or trite. Big, wow. Sorry, that was 2 big words for me. But the truth is how actually important is that?
Well, okay, let's talk about naps for a second. So napping, you're either a person that is going to be open to taking naps or not. And if you're not open to taking naps at all, consider the science and then make your decision. So a good nap needs to be less than 30 minutes so that you don't enter sleep inertia.
Then I'm drunk.
Exactly. And you've experienced this. This is why a lot of people have been turned off to naps, because you experience sleep inertia, which is your body actually keeping yourself asleep. And we know from the science that happens somewhere between 25 and 30 minutes of unconsciousness, falling asleep with your eyes closed and deep breathing. But before that, and what's crazy is 20 minutes will actually allow you to kind of clear the mental cobwebs. And you'll wake up at after 20 minutes or so. And even if you only slept for 10 minutes, you set your alarm for a 20-minute period, and you actually only really slept for about 10 minutes of that, your brain kind of just does this cobweb clearing thing, and you can only really experience it if you've tried it. So I would say pick a Saturday, pick a day that's not a work day, and try it. And if you can get the discipline down, just like anything else, it's a muscle that you have to work out to learn how it works. I've been napping now for maybe 6 years. And
Really?
the 20-minute nap, when Dan Pink actually started talking about it, I was so excited because he does the cup of coffee method, where the coffee and the caffeine kicks in 20 minutes later. So we know that caffeine takes about 30 minutes to enter the bloodstream. So he'll down the cup of coffee, take his nap, and then the caffeine provides that extra jolt of energy when he's waking up. And, so you can kind of rig the system, but you have to practice it. It's not this thing where
you cannot go past that 25, 30-minute threshold, or else this would be like you feel like you're wasted.
Yep.
Huh.
and I'm trying to remember the author of the book, Up from Slavery. Did you ever have to read that?
I don't think so.
Okay, it was by Booker T. Washington. I had to read
Okay,
this in,
yeah,
in
yeah,
high
yeah.
school, called Up from Slavery. And there's a section of the book where he says, when was this book written? Okay, 1901. Okay, Booker T. Washington, 1901. He said, I have found the skill of lying down for 20 minutes for a quick nap
No way.
to be critical and essential to my workflow
No
and
way.
to his personal self-discipline. So this is from 1901. This isn't anything new.
And think
that-
about the reduced like cognitive load that they had back in 1901 versus us. Like we have attention residue everywhere.
Yep.
Huh.
So I think that's one of the tools in your arsenal. That's one of the the things that you can use on the days that you're feeling that kind of just like everything's going crazy. But you can only go unconscious. You can only lay down to take a nap when you know that you've got things in trusted places waiting for you when you wake up. You can't be being driven by the latest and the loudest and the phone calls and the emails and the texts that are coming in constantly. You've got to have a way of managing those boundaries and expectations so that you can take that 20-minute nap. And most people, their life is so out of control and crazy that they can't even consider taking a nap because of, how out of control their life is.
Which the thing I've wanted us to talk about the whole time that we never got to was how. So let's say you take that nap, and then you're sitting back down at your desk, and one of the things that has been literally blowing my mind is realizing how much time I spent, what I've kind of started to call wondering and wandering, meaning then I would sit back down and be like, I'll scroll through my emails, see if anything came in that I need to respond to. Oh, yeah, that's right. I had to email back. And then I get started on that. I'm like, oh, that's right. They needed that from me. And then I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I got this priority that I wrote down this morning that need to get done. And in 90 seconds, I have destroyed myself versus getting so clear on this block of time, and whether it's 20 minutes, 90 minutes, and knowing that I'm doing this, so my email's turned off. I'm not doing or I've checked the fires. There's no fire. Okay, and I think there's an understated understanding of how beyond critical that is. Yet from moment one of education or experience or work, we are pulled so far away from that. So as we wrap up our time, I'd love kind of just like whether it's your thoughts on how important it is or how you try and protect it, or what does it do for us when it is just like the big green button that says press me.
Boundaries. So many of us need to take the time to clarify boundaries and expectations with the people that we work with. So this isn't easy. This takes time to define what your boundaries are going to look like. So many people are walking around with no boundaries whatsoever. They have no hard edges of how their email response time is going to be covered, how their texting response time is going to be recovered. So I tell people, if you text me, I might not respond. Now, there are certain people in my life, like my wife, and only a few others, I can name those off the top of my head, that I actually allow notifications for. So this is something that I've personally had to work through and
It's hard.
wrestle with. It is not easy,
No.
and sometimes people get pretty ticked at you because of they just don't understand it. But a lot of people have an expectation that all communication needs to be synchronous. So if it's on my mind right now, you need to be able to answer it right now. And we need to be able to give to each other the gift of asynchronous communication. Very few things need an answer right in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And if your expectation is, I have to put down everything that I'm doing to listen to what you have to say, we may need to talk about that. Now, with the exception that your boss, your supervisor, your direct report, maybe your life partner, they do have the power to interrupt you and call you out of whatever you're doing at any point in time. So right now, I've turned off email, I've turned off texting, my phone's in a drawer somewhere else because the science actually tells us that if we can see our phones, it actually has the same mental pressure as if it was just on, sitting in front of us. Even if the phone is turned off, HBR article came out about this that I'll link to over at joshmitch.com/meaningfulwork. But this HBR article basically said that even if the phone is turned off and turned upside down, the mental pressure that that image provides to your psyche is the same as if it were on and lighting up. So people that sit there with the phone down at their desk, or you're at a restaurant, if we ever go back to restaurants again, and you're sitting down with your phone turned upside down, it actually doesn't really do anything. It actually sends the message that I'm going to allow anything and anyone to interrupt me at any point. So
Not
right
that
now,
just this iPhone is
Yes, sir?
huge in my pocket and I got to get it out.
Yeah, so leaving it somewhere else is a big kind of takeaway that you can consider. But here's the next thing. So my wife right now, she's home. She knows that she can come and interrupt me right now if she needs to.
Yep.
And even though my phone is turned off and away, another HBR article talks about this idea of having an untouchable day, where you are not connected to any technology whatsoever. So you're going to spend the entire day off the grid. And they say, look, okay, if you're married and you're worried about your life partner finding you, just let them know where you're going to be ahead of time, and they can come and drive there. If it's really an issue or someone's in the hospital and you need to go visit them or something, they can take the 10 or 30 minutes to come get you and then take you to the hospital. They can come and interrupt you in that way. So we believe the lie that we really need to be attached to our phones and our emails for critical information, and that's really a lie that's keeping us from a productivity breakthrough of focus. So those boundaries and those hard edges to say, look, I'm not going to check my email before I go to bed. How many of us check our email before we go to bed because we just want to see, is there something that someone needs from me tonight that I can just send to them before I go to snooze land? And guess what? It actually it stifles your sleep. It robs the rejuvenating power of going to sleep by checking your email.
Sometimes I'm like, well, before I shower, let me hop on email real quick. And it's like, for what? Like, right. I'm going into the shower. And sometimes you're like, well, you can think about like what your response might be. I'm like, I don't even like. I'm going to think about it when I sit down. But there's this need to I don't know whether it's to multitask or. Part of the program I've been going through is they are kind of forcing upon us to unitask in all areas of our life. When you eat, eat. When you watch TV, watch TV. When you go for a walk, go for a walk. When you go to the gym, like leave your phone elsewhere. Yeah. And it structures and it feels so weird.
Well, yeah. But what's happening though is that our brains and our bodies and our spirits are being rejuvenated when we allow ourselves to just use that one thing to what it's designed for. But kind of going back to this idea of, email or texting or whatever, you respond to it when you say that you'll respond to it. So you let people know, hey, look, here's the expectation. I'm going to check my email every day at 3 p.m. and I'll get back to you. So I have this friend who is a pastor in the Virginia area, and he only checks his email twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if you email him on Friday, he's not checking that again until Tuesdays. And that rigid boundary has allowed people to trust that they're going to get a reply on a Tuesday or a Thursday. And if it goes too many Tuesdays and Thursdays, that maybe something's wrong and they actually need to reach out or resend that email again. So what can you define in your life and in your expectations with others? You can say, hey, look, I'm going to check my email every day by 3 or 5 p.m. and I will respond. But a lot of us use email as a place to work, or we use, texting or whatever, right as it comes in. I'm going to jump into that task. Well, internal locus of control. You have the ability to focus on what you decide to focus on. So you can say, I'm going to take this incoming input and I'm going to come back to that later. And that person can trust that you will get back to them, because you actually have to get back to them. This only works if you actually do go back and follow up with what your commitment is and with what that expectation is. Most people, they've never thought about it. They've never defined it. They're being driven by the latest and the loudest, as David Allen would say, who's one of my favorite thinkers on this. But what do you need to do in your life to say, look, I'm going to put a hard edge to this? Not everything. You don't have to become a crazy person. Look, like I still have a phone. I still have social media. I still check my email like crazy, and I get out of control just like you do. You
And
know,
it
I'm
feels
not,
so good.
but you've got to have a system to get back into priority, back into a place where you can sit down, you can focus, or stand up if if you believe that sitting down is the new smoking, and you're at your stand-up desk. Get into that place where you can flow, where you can focus, where you can take one step forward. And that can only happen if the other people that you work with in your life have recognized, look, wait, he'll get back to me later on that. She'll get back to me later on that, and I'll trust her. And, I think that's a big piece of it, is that most people don't trust that you're going to get back to them. So they bug you, and they bug you, and they bug you. And when was the last time somebody said to you, hey, look, I'll get back to you on that. Send me the email, and I'll get back to you in a couple days. But do you actually get back to them? That's when I think people
And
are like,
how many
I can't trust them.
Because I can hear, as you're talking, I can hear people screaming, saying, you don't understand how many emails I get or how I have to respond. There's no way I can't, be on my email. My boss thinks I'm not working if I don't reply quick enough. And I think even a micro boundary of saying, hey, if you had 45-minute or two, I try to always in my day, especially the consulting work, if I'm on site, I try to still schedule 2 90-minute blocks of time. So that way I know I have 3 hours of hard blocked time to actually make the progress or get the thinking done that I need to do. And even if somebody had to check their email every hour, and every other hour you could block out 45 minutes to actually get work done, I think you would begin to get blown away on how far you could get. And nothing speaks like getting back to people and doing what you said you're going to do consistently. And sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the flow. If you take a week or two and step out of that and really open up a new possibility by trying and setting some boundaries in place, whether they're micro, whether they're huge, ambitious boundaries, I don't think you can understate what it will do for you in just a matter of weeks.
There's different kinds of work that we have to think about. So there's work that is the doing work. And this methodology comes out of the David Allen Company, and they've helped me a lot kind of understand this. So we have doing work where we're actually in the meat of the work, and that's what you're talking about, kind of scheduling those 2 90-minute blocks to actually get things done, actually move the needle on that project. But we also have to remember that some of our work is defining work. We actually have to figure out what the work is. And if you haven't defined what your work is, when you sit down to do it, you're going to look to your email. You're going to look to your texts. You're going to look to, hey, do I have any voicemails coming through? Oh, maybe I'll check Facebook real quick to see if anybody's emailed me or messaged me there. So that's the issue, is that you can't really move the needle forward in your work if when you sit down to do work, you don't know what it is. And there's a very specific way about going to understanding what your work is going to be. So you've got to define what the outcome is. What does done look like? What does wild success look like on this? What is it going to look like when it's done? How will we know when it's done? What's the criteria for the person that needs this? What do they think about it? And only when you've defined what your work is and what the outcome is, can you actually sit down to say, okay, well, what do I need to do next? And that doesn't happen in an email. That doesn't happen in a text message. You have to define what that work is. So you need doing time. You also need defining time. And that breakthrough of realizing, where in my life do I need to schedule some time to define what my work actually is, and where in my life do I need to schedule time to actually do the work, that's a real change in thinking from being driven by, things as they come at you. And I know every job is going to be different. So some jobs are going to need support type jobs or things that are real time as they're coming in, questions and concerns. But I would say, even within an organization like that, can you schedule times where, look, we're going to have support hours from this time to this time? You can block out the world around you. We do it when we're in meetings, when we decide to block the rest of the world out. We take the time and say, look, I'm not going to look at anything else right now. You do it all the time. And when you go to sleep, you decide, I'm not going to check email for the next 5 hours, 7 hours, or 8 hours or more if you're really being intentional about your sleeping pattern. So recognizing the difference between doing time and defining time, I think, is a big takeaway that I had to learn and that I had to practice and really build into my life. And I still have to remind myself, when was the last time I just sat down and defined my work? And all of that comes out of Peter Drucker's knowledge work mindset, and his book, The Effective Executive, kind of really talked about that. Of we need to define the game that we're in. How do you know what game you're in if you haven't defined it, and if you haven't figured out what the rules of that game are? So I think that's a big takeaway.
Next week, and the week after, and the week after on the Meaningful Work podcast, Josh Mitchell.
Maybe we should just start our own separate podcast where we just go back and forth together. Who knows?
This, I mean this in a well way. Like, I have more questions than answers because, and I know we've run so long, but I think there is two ways of hearing the things that you're talking about. There's the oh yeah, okay, you're right. Yeah, I got to have that work defined. And then there's I could get stuck under the avalanche of what is coming my way for the rest of my career, or I can do something that feels uncomfortable. I can cross over to the island and I can try to fight my way out. And I tell you, my execution still feels like it's at about 20% success rate, but I am so bought into, I need to have zero wondering what I'm sitting down to do at any moment. And that has, as somebody who loves automation, it frustrates me that I have to be the one to choose that. Like, can't something tell me what that is? And I think we've all been conditioned that way because of email. Email tells me what I need to do next. Well, sometimes I block, sometimes you can block email. Anyways,
Well, and there's an app. So couple last, we've been going long, but you know what? If you're still listening to this, chances are you're the kind
into
of person
it.
You want to take the next step. So here's some practical things. One is an app called Freedom, and it's a little butterfly icon. What Freedom will do for you is it will actually block your internet connection either at a scheduled time frame, so every day from this time to this time, your internet will actually get cut off except for sites that you approve. It will also block text messages on your phone. It can block email on your phone. You can decide. And their app was so popular that it's starting to be integrated into screen time. Although I think screen time is too easy to bypass. So sometimes I've had to give it to my wife Hope, and I've had to say, Hope, you set the password when it says allow access or continue using. You have to put the password in if it's something that's critical. So that's a quick win for a tool to focus. Another thing is to schedule a retreat day, a personal retreat. And you can do that in a half day. You can do that in a morning. You could do that in a weekend. I have a friend who will book an appointment or book a hotel. This was pre-COVID, so he would go to a hotel.
The real
and he
cheap
would literally, give himself a retreat. Give himself a personal retreat. He really liked the atrium and the restaurant at a particular hotel. So he'd spend the whole day in that place getting a ton of creative work done, and in an environment. He would just tell people, hey, look, I'm going to be away for a trip. You won't be able to reach me on this date.
Yeah.
And it was in his email. He had the auto reply on. So the whole world was taken care of. All the tasks were delegated and cleaned up beforehand. And then he just went and took a retreat. And how many of us need to look at our calendar and figure out, when can I carve out a time, 4 hours, 5 hours, maybe a whole day? Start with a quick win before you do a whole weekend.
Yeah.
But
Even
that's where
one
this could really
Saturday
go.
a quarter.
Yeah.
It's okay to leave the family because this time makes you better. I carve out 3 hours on Saturday morning for what I call penalty box time, and it almost hurts me to be away from the family. But the rest of the weekend, I am a better version of me. I know that Monday morning at 5:30 when I wake up, or 5:30 when I sit down at my desk, things are set up for success. So my brain is not wondering, I got this and I got that. I just cleared it all. I'm home now. So good.
Yeah, so a lot of that is just self-discipline, self-leadership, setting up what works for you, because there is no silver bullet.
No.
I don't think there's ever going to be an automation that tells you, even if automation says, hey, Josh, you should sit down and write your book right now.
Screw you.
Well, you can say no to it. And some of us are programmed as rebels. So if somebody tells us what to do, we're going to say no. So we all have to figure out what is the individualized way of applying your own system, your own expectations, your own internal locus of control for figuring out what's going to put me in the best state when whatever needs to be true. And I know that if I need to be present for my wife and my family and for an event that I'm doing, there's certain things that I need to clean up, just like I would before going away for vacation. Certain things that I would need to clean up, delegate, make sure are communicated clearly. So like right now I'm in the process of doing that for parent leave. So I'm going to have a couple weeks where I'm away when our baby girl is born. And I'm going through every single area of my life and saying what's on autopilot, what needs to be communicated, what's not on autopilot, what information is stuck in my head that I need to externalize. And this is a whole nother episode. This is a whole nother training.
Yeah.
But a lot of us haven't written down our procedures and our rituals. And that's why it feels so stressful and so overwhelming. We actually bloat. We actually think that we're way more smarter and intelligent than we actually are because we keep it all in our heads. And if you just looked at it on a sheet, you're like, wow, I could improve that. We should probably switch points 5 and 6. So that can really standard operating procedures, SOPs, workflows, all of that is really another actionable step of do that in your life. Do that for every area of your life. And again, this doesn't have to be like, super meticulous and crazy. Do it on the back of a napkin.
It sounds psycho until you've crossed over a little bit. And then it's like, why would I waste mental energy on that when I can pull this note up and just be like, do that, do that, do that, do that. That's what I do with my mornings right now. While I'm trying to figure out my best rhythm, I don't think about it. I set it the night before, and oftentimes it's the same. And I just like, okay, I do this and I do this. And I'm like, wait, what's next? And I'm not thinking about all of my options. I just literally open up my page in Notion and I'm like, oh, that's next. Okay, cool. Penalty box time. I'm not like, okay, what's next? No, I've got a list of what's next.
Atul Gawande talks about this in his book, The Checklist Manifesto. You don't have to read the book. There's an NPR podcast that summarizes it very quickly. So if you look that up, it's so true. Doctors perform better when they have robust checklists. And there's 2 kinds of checklists. There is a one where you just kind of make sure that everything on that checklist got done. And then there's another kind where it all needs to be sequential. So this needs to happen before this in order for point 4 is not going to happen unless points 1, 2, and 3 happen. And there's 2 kinds of checklists. So one is just where you check it and you make sure that all of it got done so the sequence doesn't matter. And we can build those in our lives, and you can trust that that checklist is going to be smarter than you. And this guy, Atul Gawande, doctor, works with medicine, works in the nitty-gritty of surgery and things that are literally life-threatening. So if anybody has something to say about this, it's him. And he talks about it in that NPR podcast, so you can get some takeaways from that. But it's really fascinating that those lists are actually what allow a pre-flight checklist. Imagine if the pilot did not have an actual checklist, but did it all from their head. They're not doing it from their head. They're doing it from the checklist. And so many times, even experienced pilots and surgeons and people that seriously have life-threatening or life-altering careers, they have to use that external checklist. And when mistakes have been made in those industries and in those jobs, it's because they ignored the checklist and thought that they were smarter than them. So there's just so much evidence about this. It's like, use it to your advantage. Write it down on the back of a napkin, and you'll actually take advantage of this. We code it in all of this science, and it sounds all it sounds really fancy and crazy, and oh my gosh, I'll never get to that. It is simple as writing it down. Just write it down.
And let it be fun.
Let it be fun.
Okay. We're about to challenge Jocko Willnick for the longest podcast of the week, but I love it.
Or Dan Carlin, because, those hardcore history podcasts
How
are like
long
7
do they
hours
go?
long.
No
7
way.
hours. Yeah. He's
That's
insane.
so impressive.
He's my role model.
I saw Jocko the other day had a 4-hour podcast. And sometimes I listen. It's like how Gary, I will say a thing, and then you can say a thing, and then I'm just hitting done. But Gary Vee said, if it's good, it's good. He's like, how long was Avatar? We didn't care that Avatar was 3 hours long.
Right.
Because it was good. And so sometimes with Jocko, I'm like, we're talking about something that's so far away from what I came here to learn about. But I feel like I'm hanging out with you guys. And the audio is so crisp.
Audio makes such a big difference.
my
In a
goodness.
separate thing, we can talk about how, audio quality, and I think audio programs in general are going to see an increase in the coming year. So podcasts, I think, are conversational. They can help us learn. They can help us, dive into what's out there. But then there's a whole nother level, I think, of audio coaching and audio, even like with the Headspace app and things that are in that
Yeah.
category. I think we're going to continue to see things like the podcast medium grow because we know that you're in a different state of mind when you listen to a podcast. You're in a different state of mind when you watch a YouTube video. So YouTube, you're either, getting into you want to see the visuals, you want to see, hear the music, you want the vlog style. But when you're on a podcast, like you said, it's like you're hanging out with friends.
Yeah.
And the more authentic and, what's the word the social media people use, it needs to be native. So, so podcasts
Yeah.
should be native. But I think there's another native audio format of the audio coaching and audio courses that we're going to continue to see rise in popularity, because when you just listen to the audio only, it's like it's speaking like to your soul. It's like it's speaking to, a different part of your
Yeah.
brain that a YouTube video doesn't.
Which is so like, as you're saying that, I can oftentimes, I'll finish my day and I'll go upstairs, say hey, and maybe start cooking dinner for the family. And it's so funny because it's like, what do I want to listen to? And some days it's financial advice on YouTube. Some days it's I'm going to start paying attention now to maybe my mood or my feelings or my day and why I'm choosing what I'm choosing. Because some days it's like, yeah, I want a podcast. Some days I want deep research. Some days I want just music.
And even in the category of music, there are certain frequencies and certain styles of music that actually send data or delta waves into the brain. You can research this stuff to the max. It's so fascinating. There's certain pitches that actually bring your brain to ease. Look up delta waves and theta waves and all that kind of stuff. And there's certain music that's been out there that's been released that will actually help you focus better because of the frequency of that music. So not even necessarily like a song like pop radio or whatever, but engineered music for focus and for productivity. There's another website called Focus at Will that has curated different kinds of instrumental music for peak focus. And there's a subscription with that. It's a paid service that you have to use. What I've done personally is I have curated Spotify playlists.
Yeah.
So I'm a Spotify subscriber, and I'll just throw into buckets, okay, this is the kind of music that I want when I want to be in this context. And this is another list of music that I want to use when I'm in this context. And that music then becomes a trigger to put you in that frame of mind that you need to be in.
Yeah.
So I've got a sleeping music playlist, music that really helps me sleep well. Look up the song. I think it's called Our Work Is Done, and by Lifescapes. Remember those old kiosks at Walmart and Target and places like that, and you could go up and you could press the button and it would start playing music, and then you could grab the CD. So Lifescapes would hire these different musicians, and one of their albums was a collection of sleeping songs. And the first song on that, there's an Amazon reviewer that said, this song is so mesmerizing that I start falling asleep within 30 seconds of listening to it. And what's insane is that if you use it every single night to fall asleep to, it becomes a trigger that you can use in the middle of the day for your 20-minute nap.
Oh my gosh.
Our Work Is Done. Look it up. I actually wrote a blog post about it at joshmitch.com, so you can find it there as well.
If you like more of this, come back to the Meaningful Work podcast for every even episode. Dude, oh my gosh. Barbara, cancel the rest of the day. Josh, appreciate it so much.
It's been so good to be with you.
So many directions, ideas, thoughts, not to feel overwhelmed by, but to be intrigued by. And if you're still here, think about what one or two things felt like the most fun to you. Start there and go unlock that meaningful high performance work. Josh, again, thank you so much. We'll definitely talk to you next time.
Thanks, Josh. See you next time.